And just like that, we are live. Look at that. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, hello, Kevin.
Yeah, good to see you. We were just chatting backstage. We were kind of, I was almost kind of getting into the weeds backstage of all this fun and exciting stuff that you guys are doing, and had to catch myself and save it for the actual broadcast. So I'll try to do that. Or I did do that. So
Not a problem.
We'll figure it out. But thanks for joining me.
No, my pleasure.
As I often like to do, I often like to start with taking us back, take us way back in the early Jeff days, development days. I guess was there kind of a jumping off point when it came to technology? How did you get into technology? We'll cover all that stuff if you're okay with it.
Yeah, it's fine. Again, how far do you want to go back? As you can tell by my youthful appearance, I've been around for a couple of years, so.
Well, go as far as you're comfortable with. Let's start with where'd you grow up? Let's start with that.
I grew up in Oklahoma City. Went to Oklahoma State and was going to major in computer science and electrical engineering. And then I got into electrical engineering and realized that wasn't for me. And in fact, I'd really kind of fallen in love with the business side of things. And I remember seeing my first Business Week and thought, well, this is my magazine. Right. Maybe not typical for a 15-year-old, but it was for me. And, and then going to college and going to school probably in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, was a great time to be in the computer space. And so I graduated, started path as a programmer, but ended up, through a weird circumstance, I was manager of office automation at Southland Corporation, which is the parent company of 7-Eleven. And I was like 22, 23 years old, right? Yeah. Because I was really the only one that sort of understood how PCs worked. And office automation was trying to deal with these new things called PCs and VisiCalc and Lotus 123 and stuff like that. And again, I go way back, but through that journey, ended up dealing with local area networks. If you remember Novell and Banyan, those were big deals. And from that, saw an opportunity to create a software company, which I did, that basically made those local area networks easier to manage, and started dealing with, or started selling that product, obviously to corporations direct, but to VARs and integrators, who were the early MSPs, right? And so those VARs or integrators would buy the PCs, the networks, they'd put them all together for their accounts, and ship it turnkey white label. I mean, essentially what they're doing today. But they would also do it in every month they started at zero, right? Even my company then started at zero. There was no MRR. You sold your product and you started next month at zero. And we grew that company, started that in a garage and I went to IPO in 94, and then sold that to McAfee in 95. So, and we're doing probably 20 plus million in revenue, but again, 20 plus million in revenue annually, with each month starting at zero effectively. Right. So, you talk about, things that keep you up at night. That would be one of the things that keep you up at night, right? Is filling that $2 million plus pipeline every month. And so, that was a nice hit. Fast forward, again, I wasn't necessarily, didn't have to work for a period of time, but found myself back helping some friends with their MSPs probably 7-8 years ago. One guy was wanting to basically migrate from break fix into managed services. The other one had a large CSP component, dealing with a lot of Microsoft licenses, and wanted to go to the MSP model. And, both of those were dealing with large numbers of clients. And I think, going back to kind of the early history of stuff and thinking about it, it's like, there's got to be a better way to deal with client scalability. And so that led me to CloudRadial today. But, in between there, I've done .com marketing. I've done neighborhood news. I mean, I've done these variety of technical things that are just really kind of the journey of technology, right? I mean, getting into the cloud, getting into digital marketing, digital advertising, really digital productivity. It's been a fascinating journey over these last 30, 40 years, watching everything grow up and become what it is today.
You often talk about themes, kind of common currents among CEOs or founders. It sounds like, I mean, would you describe that you've had the ability to reinvent yourself a couple times along the way?
Oh, definitely. I reinvent myself every month, basically. I mean, I think anytime you're dealing with a successful company, again, at the first company I started writing the code, right? That was my first, I wrote the first piece of code, grew that company to 150 people, led the IPO tour, negotiated the sale. It's not the same person that does all of that, right? You have to reinvent and change as you go along the way. And, fortunately was able to acquire the team to help me grow and acquire really good, solid advice and mentors in that period of time. And then fast forward to today. I mean, again, same thing. I wrote the first code here at CloudRadial, but now growing beyond that, we're at 25 people today and growing quickly. And so I don't get to write code as much as I like. In fact, I get to write no code these days. But again, it's just a constant reinvention because again, if you're the CEO, you're the only person in the company that has the ability to be pushed up in the organization. And one of the things you find in typical companies is it's hard to find people fast enough with the skill. So if you're rapidly growing, you hire somebody today because they're great people. And then a year down the road, if you're especially at 100% growth, they don't have the skills that's required at that next level. And that's the CEO too, right? So it's important that the CEO recognize that their skills are always out of step and they need good people. They need to be forward thinking and they need to be positioning themselves to rise above it all, to build the team that basically did what they did in the first day, right? And I think that's hard for anybody to adjust to, but the theme of reinvention, I just think that you reinvent yourself as a person many times as you learn from your own experiences. But in a successful company, you're reinventing yourself again every month. I don't think my job here is now every quarter it's a different job. So, I mean, that's what I like about it, but it's different and it's not for everybody.
Definitely not for everybody. Are there specific moments in the past or maybe lessons learned from, you've had quite a lot of success and everyone that's been successful will tell you that they've had a lot of failure along the way as well. But maybe let's start with the failure. And any things come to mind as far as just obstacles or hurdles that were just major barriers to progressing forward, that kind of one of those moments that you'll never forget?
I think, the first company we started, I mean, I remember leaving Southland because I quit that job to go basically start my first company or basically dedicate it full time to it. But as I left the vice president's office where I just resigned and walked out, on the radio was, the 1987 market meltdown, right? And it turns out meltdowns are great times to start businesses because everything is at its low point. And if it's going to come out of it, you're going to be caught in those upwinds, right? And so you actually kind of want to start your company in a downturn is actually better. Seems odd, but it does seem to work out better. And so that rise over the next 8 years, again, the economy was continuing to rebound. Everything was working well. And it just seemed easy. And then I had a company in the .com era that was focused on digital marketing, and everything seemed easy at first, and then it came crashing down. And I don't think that was a big, emotionally and financially, draining experience. And I don't think I understood how to fail at that point. I didn't understand. I took it very personally. Not really given fact to the basically the market conditions. Again, we had the not only the market meltdown in March, but we had 9/11 in September. You're just not going to fight against those trends. The company had good technology, had the right the right approach. It just didn't have the financial backing to weather those two big events. And so I think for me, the failure stuff, because again, the first company just naturally grew. I think the failure hit me harder and personally because I took it like I could control that, and you really
Mm.
can't. And I think that was kind of my, my lowest moment, but it was also one of those things years later when I was able to put it in perspective, going like, it just is what it is, And again, what you want to do is find a good market, a good team, and good updrafts, and kind of ride them as best you can. But again, there's just things going in the market that sometimes you just can't fight. And again, there's things you can do to prevent it or things you can mitigate it, but sometimes it just is overwhelming, and that's what it is. So
Yeah, but it's, I think one of the benefits of having been around for a while, I shaved, so you can't see all the gray hair. But yeah, I think one of the benefits is having that hindsight, and understanding the cyclical nature. And then to your point, sometimes you could have the right cards in the hand, and just the headwinds just are not in your favor for whatever reason, and it's what you learn out of that, I guess, is what helps you, down the line.
it's funny when after selling that first company to McAfee, it was a great. I just felt exciting and free, and it was like 30 something, and didn't have to work ever again, um, and I just people would come to me and go like, well, you got really lucky, and I would bridle at that. I would just get almost kind of defensive or angry, like, what do you mean I earned that? I worked hard for that, right?
Yeah.
And then you realize years later, there's a big element of luck to this. And again, you need a component of that to basically get the big headwinds, and to get maybe a bigger exit. But sometimes you need luck just to even survive day to day, right? And I think again, entrepreneurs feel empowered generally to go do whatever. Again, they feel like they can really solve a problem, but sometimes those problems are either intractable or the market forces or whatever else kind of beat you back. And you just have to learn that maybe, sometimes you fight through it. Sometimes you just have to surrender to it. The last company I had in digital marketing, or the neighborhood news site, after a few years, great idea, great concept. But after a few years, you realize you're competing against Facebook, and there's no
Yeah.
competing with Facebook, right?
Yeah.
At least at that point in time, you go like, well, competing with Facebook's time to get out and change something else, either repivot the company or start a new company, which is effectively, it chose the latter option, right? Because again, having the wisdom, again, working 60-hour weeks for years doesn't guarantee success if you're competing with Facebook, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Hey man, I guess it goes back to the old Kenny Rogers song, right? Just got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. But
It is.
that's a tough thing, right? I mean, that's a tough,
It's your
especially.
baby, and you don't really
Yeah,
want to walk away from your baby, but sometimes,
yeah, yeah.
that's the smarter play.
I see it quite often with the ones that CEOs or business owners that are constantly stuck in the weeds. It's hard to pull your head up sometimes and
Mhm.
think strategically and look at macroeconomics. And yeah, I think even sometimes when you have that opportunity to do that, it's hard to really gauge it. And sometimes it takes outside mentors or others that have been down that path to kind of nudge you in the right direction. So it's we spend I think we spend a couple hours maybe going through some psychological or psychology
Yeah.
behind some of this stuff. But so you've done exceptionally well, I guess, over the years. You've had the opportunity to reinvent yourself and kind of jump back to the MSP space, and then lo and behold, you have this thing called CloudRadial. So what was the idea behind this? What was the problem that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I want to go back to address one thing that you
Mhm.
brought up, and the way I've approached it, and this is going to seem a little strange, but I've always approached it with a little schizophrenia, in the sense that, inside, like even early on, I know I'm the lead developer, but I also know I'm also the manager of development, and I'm also the president, and I'm also the CEO, and I'm also a board member, and I'm also an investor. And if I can put myself in each one of those roles, I can evaluate how each of the people below me are doing, even though they're all me, right? If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So as a developer, I can go like, man, I got a great piece of code today done, and this is a really cool feature. And then the investor in me is going like, is this going to make us money? right?
Mhm.
Is this going to actually accomplish what we're doing? Meanwhile, the development manager is going like, is this the best use of your time to be writing code, or could you find somebody to write this code better, right? And if you approach that, especially in these early days when you're, a 1, 2, 3 person firm, I think there's if you can approach it with that dose of schizophrenia where you're just peeling all of those different hats, I do think that helps you take the perspective and take the personality out of it, right? Because again, sometimes you do get so lost in the weeds, you can't see, that you're doing something that's not going to have an investor return, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, go ahead.
Let's say it's like you're in my head. But no, you're absolutely right. But that I think that perspective comes with experience, right? 'Cause, I mean,
You have to get there,
yeah,
and you have to be totally. I think the most successful entrepreneurs are also the most self-aware and objective,
yeah,
right? They know where their strengths are, they know where their weaknesses are, and they play to those things, but they also mitigate their weaknesses too. I'm not the best in sales, and so I've always surrounded myself with good salespeople, to help me mitigate my what I perceive as a weakness. Right? I'm not a good developer. I can get stuff started, but I'm not a good developer. So I always try to like find people that are better. And I think ultimately, as long as you're CEO and finding people better than you,
hmm,
and looking at it from that kind of schizophrenia way, like even CEO, like why am I the CEO here as opposed to somebody else? Right? I mean, as a board member, I need to ask myself that. And then as an investor, I need to ask myself that. Right? So why is it me in this role as opposed to somebody else? And those are things that, I try to ask myself on a regular basis and try to measure up to. So I'm always holding myself accountable, which, again, there's probably a psychiatric, screening in my future, but it's just the way I
right.
look at it. So, so,
Understood.
so
Yeah.
with
So
oh,
yeah, let's hear it. Yeah, take
so
us
with
through
CloudRadial,
the idea.
it was interesting because again, having worked with these two companies, and then basically everything in the market, and again, this goes to kind of what you're building here is typically now it's become very vendor driven. I mean, it always has been, because again, even 40 years ago, it was Microsoft, it was Novell, it was Banyan that was driving things. It was McAfee, with the AV
Mhm.
stuff. And so it's always been a very vendor focused environment because that's what MSPs do. They take technology, they take the best assortment of vendors, and they put together the best combination of things, whether that be a workstation, a piece of software, servers, printers, whatever, and they put it together for the benefit of their clients. So it's always been it's like you shop for the clients themselves, right? And
Mhm.
you put together the best approach. And and so looking at cloud, looking at the industry when I got back into it, because again, I was pretty blown away by the MRR model. It's like, this is brilliant, right? This is awesome. Um, and but you look at it and then you think, well, okay, so now I need to go to market and take all these tools and communicate this. Because again, at the end of the day, and we just did a webinar yesterday on the QBR and how you really need to kill it because it's long past its prime. Because everything that's typically covered in the QBRs, everything that you see at trade shows as an MSP, your clients just don't care about. I mean, they
Mhm.
just, again, um, I mean, and I have to say, even, the security tools, everything that dominates the conversations of MSPs on a daily basis, the clients just assume it's going to work. Right. I
Mhm.
mean, you don't bring on a client and go like, man, I hope I keep you secure. I really, you know, God, I don't know why you hired us because, we can't ensure security, but we can work really hard towards it. And they just assume it's going to work, just the same that you assume that your CPA is going to add the numbers correctly, or they're going to file your taxes on time, or the bank is going to basically have your money available to you when you expect it. And there's some issues with that,
Right.
but generally people only care about the stuff they care about, and what keeps the business owners of the MSPs up, or the business owners that the MSP serve, is not anything that keeps the MSP up at night. And seeing that disconnect out there, because again, you get out there and you see all these technologies, you want to go out and say, look, we've got Sophos or we've got Sentinel One, and clients don't care, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things in trying to solve these large numbers of clients for these first companies is like, how do we do this? How do we basically break the link between vendors and solutions. I'm trying to do a QBR with our clients, but all I really have to show them is at that time, maybe an RMM report, which is not really that client friendly. And you show it to the clients, they go like, I understand what you just showed me. It's like, well, I don't really understand what I just showed you either, but it's all I've got to show you. Right. And it's not really it's not really the best approach. And so rethinking that and rethinking how to scale that client relationship became kind of I saw as an opportunity, right? And that's where, the first lines of code got written. That's where the first approach got written. And I remember showing it to the first set of MSPs, and everybody was like, "What is this? I don't know what this is." Right? What do you mean putting something in front of clients? We have a ticketing portal. It's like, why would you want to do something else? And it's like, well, do you really want to be known for ticketing? I mean, it's not, again, if you're trying to become the VCIO and trying to go in this, look, we're going to be your strategic partner. We're going to help you deal with all these technology challenges. Oh, by the way, we have a ticketing portal. So when you have a problem, call us. I mean, it almost devalues the whole relationship with the MSP because it makes it very transactional and it makes it very commodity.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a problem logging in. This guy solved it. He's costing me $200 a seat. This other guy, I have a problem logging in. He can fix it for $150 a seat. I'll go with the $150 a seat guy.
Right.
Tickets are the worst way to show value to clients. Right. And, again, when we showed CloudRadial, that was a metric, right? We had early clients go like, I don't want less tickets. I want more tickets because that's how I show value to my clients. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know that your clients are going to see it that way. Right. So it's just been interesting going in and again, with CloudRadial changing the perceptions of the way things are because they're habitually the way they are, but they don't have to stay that way.
So I'm at a trade show, right? I walk up and I see the booth, and what's the quick pitch? What are the salient points, things I need to remember?
The best thing about CloudRadial is basically we are everything client, right? So we're going to bring all of your client touch points into a single pane of glass. And when you and again, when you do that, again, it makes sense on paper because again, you're bringing in all your backup reports, you're bringing in your Office 365 license reports, you're bringing in all your ticketing, you're bringing in training, you're bringing all these things into one portal. And it is a simplifier, right? Because if you're giving a client now 5, 10, 15 different logins to different portals, now you can go back and give them one login to your portal that looks proprietary, right? There's no sense giving them a login to, if you're doing a training portal, for example, like Bigger Brains. Let's say you're using Bigger Brains and you give them the login to the Bigger Brains portal. Well, the MSP next to you can give them the login to the Bigger Brains portal. Or if you give them the login to the 365 portal, anybody can do that, right? That doesn't seem that proprietary or advantageous. And so by bringing that into a single pane of glass, it simplifies life for the client. And it also simplifies, I think, stickiness to a certain extent for the MSP because now it's not a 365, Bigger Brains, Augment, all these other tools that are integrated together. It's just their portal and it's what the MSP does, right? It's like the bank. They don't give you 10 different logins to 10 different systems to let you check their savings account or your checking account or move money, even though behind the scenes, those all may be different systems, right? But they provide it to you in a single app, a single pane of glass. And it seems like the bank knows what they're doing. But I guarantee you there's a lot of systems behind your login that are making things happen that just seem that are opaque to you, but obviously pain points for the bank, but not for you as a client. And so by bringing all those touch points into a single pane of glass, we really give the MSP a way to streamline, automate, and basically scale those client relationships. But the biggest advantage, and goes back to the QBR, it lets you reimagine what it's like to serve your clients. And I go back to, again, we've talked to now thousands of MSPs and I hear over and over again, well, we want our clients to see us as their partner. We're the partner to help them solve their problems. We're their CIO, their VCIO. And, I don't understand how you can be a partner if you only talk to them once a quarter, once a year, or never talk to them. There's a lot of you know, QBR type tools out in the market now that basically train their clients on which clients to give QBRs to, because you want to, again, if you're going to go to all the time to print and prepare and do the PowerPoint, you really want to just focus on the larger ones. Well, if they're, if the smaller ones are paying you $500,000, $2,000 a month, that may not be your largest client, but I guarantee you that's their largest IT expense, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And a strategy that says I'm not going to talk to you because you're too small doesn't really work. And so with CloudRadial, when you have the ability to basically deliver everything you deliver in a QBR today through a single pane of glass, it just takes it off the table. And then it frees up the time to talk to clients about the things that the client cares about, right? The things that actually a VCIO would talk about. A VCIO does not talk about whether they're going to be using WebRoot or Sentinel-1 or anything else. The VCIO is talking about where this company's going, how we can help empower that growth, empower those people, deliver true ROI on this investment. Those are things VCIOs talk about. And again, but again, if you're a MSP today and all you have is tools that print off RMM reports, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. How much of it, I mean, have you guys quantified the impact that it has on the relationship? And you look at things that, like renewal rates. I mean, how do you quantify the impact that, the platform has in making the relationship, much more engaged, interactive? But how do you really measure that output?
We need to do the actual hard stats. I mean, we haven't conducted the formal studies yet, so that's on
Mhm.
the to be done list. So what we
Mhm.
have is anecdotal.
Mhm.
But it's really interesting because the ones that have really embraced CloudRadial and used, the kind of the breadth of features in it, they swear by it, right? And I get hugs at trade shows. It's a very interesting experience. And again, because I've even in all the companies I've done before, I've never gotten hugs, right? They've always been interesting, but they've never been transformative, right?
Uh,
They've been maybe labor efficient or, helpful, but I never got the hugs. And I think what's different this time is, again, when you take a client first approach, we talk about 3 buckets of budget, which is managed technology, which is what most people do. And that's a cost budget. So clients just want to minimize that expense as much as possible. There's a managed people or productivity budget that companies have, which they're trying to get an ROI on. So again, if the average salary is $5,500, saving that client 10% or making that client 10% more productive pays for the MSP bill altogether, right?
mhm. Yeah.
And then there's the managed growth budget, right? Which is what companies spend to actually grow themselves, right? And that budget is huge. And if MSPs tap into that, which the larger MSPs do pretty well, I mean, because we have a range of them and we see what the larger ones do and how they conduct themselves, and they're always going for that biggest bucket of budget, right? And moving themselves out of the commodity space into that VCIO space and becoming that strategic trusted advisor. So again, when we can help MSPs get there, which we can help any MSP get there really now, uh, I mean, the payback is potentially huge if the MSP wants to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that if you look and you talked about kind of the evolution, some of the evolution of technology, and specifically as it relates to the MSP or like managed services space, it's that you had these kind of disparate tools. You had the RMM, and then you had PSA for ticketing. You could show how many tickets you opened and closed, and SLAs and all that stuff. And then got into security, which became more sticky and sexy. But there was still like this divide, right? There was the tools, and to your point, there was maybe a conversation once a quarter, probably more often like once a year, kind of a check-in, maybe preemptive of a renewal or something like that.
Hmm.
But now you're pushing it down into this almost like proactive, it's more than just a collaborative tool, right? You're bringing down into the business, where in the past it's been, it's these tools. Occasionally we'll send you a nice, pretty report with our logo on it. Now you're getting into the business, right, and becoming part of the
Hmm.
business. And so I can kind of talk, maybe, am I thinking about kind of this progression the right, or
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Because again, after having been in the space for a number of years, there's just always a sea change going on, right? Again, 10 years ago, it was, the cloud, right?
Mhm.
Before that, it was servers and, local storage, right? Prior to that, I mean, again, there's always stuff. Again, I came in when we're trying to share a hard drive, right? When the
Right.
hard drives were $10,000, a
Yeah.
10 megabyte drive was $10,000, and you had to share it because it wasn't super efficient to buy everybody a $10,000 drive.
Right.
And now, fast forward to today, it's about security today, but it won't be security 5 or 10 years from now. It'll be something else.
Mhm.
And, MSPs have to learn how to be adaptive. That pace of change is changing so fast.
Right.
And what clients need help with. I mean, we're 25 people now, and I look at all the SaaS tools we use to glue our business together. And it's really complex now. I mean, we need a lot of different things to make ourselves more efficient and take advantage of it. We have a person dedicated to data, right? To managing the data inside our company. Um, and that's at 25. If we're 25 people and have those needs, my guess is almost every business that has 25 people or more is struggling with these types of what I would call orchestration issues or composable issues of how they create their solutions, which means that things like Power BI, things like Power Apps, things with even Chat GPT are out there. These are the things that businesses are going to be asking for in a few years, that they're going to expect the MSP to go solve, or they're going to go find somebody who will solve them, and in process of that, take their business and their MSP business with them along the way. And again, this technology is not static, and that's why I love this space, because you're not optimizing for today. You need to solve today, but you need to optimize for tomorrow. And I think that's what we tried to do with CloudRadial, is make it that collaborative, interactive platform. So again, if you do a QBR with a client, what you're doing is asking them questions.
Mhm.
The webinar we did yesterday uh, was basically about just listen, right?
Mhm.
If you do a PowerPoint to go to a QBR, things are already off the rails, right? I mean, if you can't put it in Cloud Radial and make it real time accessible, I mean, think about the last time you went to a banker, to talk about a loan. He goes, well, before we talk about the loan, let me do a PowerPoint and show you how your account does and how you made 3% on your savings account. You don't care about that, right?
Mhm.
You need to be in there in that QBR, listening, observing, getting smarter, not talking about renewals, right? Because again, if you only see them 3 months, you don't have a way to scale client relationships. They're always at risk of leaving, right? If the bank never told you how much money you had, you would be looking for another bank, right? But if all that stuff's online and available, you don't even care about it because you trust that you can get to that information whenever you want.
Mhm.
And having all that information available in a client portal just means you don't have to talk about it. Means you don't have
Mhm.
to talk about ticket volume or any of that stuff, because the client can see it for themselves if they're worried about it.
Yeah.
Which means you can ask them the questions you need to ask them to figure out where that business is headed and how you go solve those problems.
I think you kind of pulled a touch on a thread there, and I think that's why I think equally, again, we were talking before we went on air, just how bullish I am on what you guys are doing in your space. Um, but it becomes transformative, right? I mean, today you're solving the technical challenges and bringing all the bringing in and creating kind of nice visuals and in kind of this interactive manner. But tomorrow, I mean, and I'm maybe projecting, roadmap for you or whatever, but tomorrow there's so many other operational or business
Mhm.
intelligence, tools, just ways that you become even more ingrained into the customer, in the customer's environment. And so it's not just about managing the IT, and maybe in a couple of years from now, it's managing their data downstream. I don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
touch on some of the future things you guys are thinking about in that regard.
Yeah, so it's fascinating because again, what we've done so far is we've basically tried to tie together as many things as possible. But also what we're trying to tie together now, whereas before we're focused a lot on things like backup and devices and things like that. Going forward, we're trying to focus more on automations,
Mhm.
and basically stripping out, if we're the portal in front of the client, then if the client can do it for themselves, then they don't need a technical person to go do it for them, right? And so, we're working to both deliver more automation features inside of our product. We're going to be integrating with more automation tools and AI-based tools to help, again, maybe solve the problem before it even gets to the technician or the service department. And then we're also working to basically kind of open up the reporting side. So again, MSPs can put more data into the portal from other sources beyond just the things that we integrate with, right? I mean, we've got the report archive now, which is nice, but there's still lots of different ways to go do that. And I really think, again, the automations, the streamlining, maybe working directly with RMMs to basically, if you need a piece of software, maybe we can just invoke the RMM directly and not have to have a technician go do that. If you need an Office 365 license, through us or one of our automation partners, we can just do that for you, right? And if we can do those things and stitch those together where the customer can drive more of their solution, again, what we're trying to do is make that hour that the MSP has with that client in those discussions as valuable as possible.
Yeah.
And again, if more things can be done automatically, again, that's just going to free up more time for the MSP to talk about and become the VCIO that the clients really want.
Yeah, I mean, talk about reducing kit cost and creating technician efficiency and really focus on kind of smart areas of growth in the business. I mean, that's exactly the path that you guys are going down.
Yeah, I don't know. The kit cost is one thing. I don't know. As I look at this space, there's all these different elements, and they're all getting more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, you look at security. You can't just buy Webroot anymore and deploy it, and feel good about yourself anymore. You need a multi-layered strategy to go approach it. What is that strategy? How to report on the strategy? How do you get client buy-in to the new cost? All of that stuff, all things I think we help with.
Mm-hmm.
But those things are complex.
Sure.
And when you roll in automations, you roll in AI. We just partnered, for example, with Thread on the chat piece because their solution deals with Teams and Slack, and they've got a whole team dedicated on making chat better.
Mm-hmm.
And we're never going to have the team that's 100% focused on that, right? And so I'd rather partner with that expertise and bring that expertise together in a nice, clean, integrated way for the client's benefit than trying to do something half-assed that, checks a box but doesn't really solve the problem.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure the kit costs go down, but they may go down relative to revenue, right? And that's really what you're focusing on. Is not necessarily whether kit costs go down or up. It's whether they go down relative to revenue. And again, you're not going to be able to tackle that get that additional revenue if you don't automate, take advantage of that kit, but then use that time that you gained for additional advantage. I talked early on, again, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, kit cost was everything, and it still is to a large number of MSPs. But I'll find MSPs constantly adding to their kit cost and then not expecting either productivity benefits or revenue benefits, right? So, if you've made your technical staff 10%, 20% more efficient because you brought in a great tool for documentation or, network discovery or whatever it is, if you're not laying off a staff person because you're now more efficient, or you're not growing revenue to absorb that extra staff person's time, you just add it to your cost. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, again, as you add to that kit cost, if you're not seeing the decrease in expenses or not seeing the increase in revenue, it's just a net penalty for you being in business. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not using your time effectively. But again, as we found with the client side, it's hard to scale those client relationships without what we're now calling a client services automation platform. We now categorize CloudRadial's approach to the market, or our platform, as a CSA, and the CSA deals with the engagement maturity of users, while the PSA deals with the operational maturity. So think about it with a restaurant. Somebody's manning the kitchen, but somebody's managing the wait staff.
Right.
And if you've got a kitchen and no wait staff, you really don't have a restaurant. If you've got a wait staff and no kitchen, you really don't have a restaurant, right? You need both working together seamlessly. So it just from the clientele that come into that establishment, or again the MSP's clients, it just works, right? And they move on and they talk about their business and they solve their business challenges. The same way in the restaurant, you're like, can you overcook this or undercook this? They don't freak out when you ask that. You customize it for that diner, and everybody's happy, right? It's the way it should be. You're focused on the client needs, not necessarily getting into the weeds about what brand of salt you use back in the kitchen, right?
Right. Yeah. Well said. So, talking kind of looking forward, any kind of in the moment piece of advice for the audience out there? MSPs, could be anything, operations. I think maybe one of them is go try CloudRadial, obviously.
Well, obviously, right.
Yeah. But anything in the moment?
I think everybody's going to get there anyway. I mean, again, I don't see an MSP being an MSP without a combination of PSA, CSA in the future, right? I just don't. I don't think MSPs that don't have that client engagement strategy nailed down will be competitive with the MSPs that have it nailed down, right? It's kind of like the same. If you don't have the PSA, you're spending more time chasing problems, more things are falling through the crack. And again, there's a time and place for all of those tools, but it's hard to see a mature MSP not working with some sort of ticketing system to organize their workload and track their time. I do see, again, with all of the MSPs out there, there's a big shift from labor to intellectual property, right? And so, a few years ago, it was everything about tracking time, and that's still important. But I think it's also important that the MSPs develop their own intellectual property around the tools that they deploy, like for Office 365, for example. Being sure to deploy that correctly, because you've seen it too. I mean, there's people deploy it smartly and some not so smart, and some to turn on all the right policies, some forget to turn on all the policies. But again, all that intellectual property and process has to be paramount now. And it's about MSPs becoming smarter about their own staff. Certainly, I think there's more outsourcing going on. Just because it's necessary. I mean, again, nobody's going to have the right skills. Operationally, again, if you've got your client engagement piece in place, the world of co-managed IT is just huge. And I think that is probably one of the biggest opportunities for MSPs, if they can get it down and show that co-managed IT client that they can, in fact, engage with them on a regular basis in an automated digital first experience, right? And so, the co-managed space is huge. And again, as an MSP with all this change going on, again, you just want to be getting smarter, faster, better as quickly as possible, because those buckets of money are just laying there waiting to be taken, right? And the first MSP that crossed the line is going to get it. So,
yeah. Well, on that note, where can people find you? What are the socials? How do we get in touch with you?
So the best way is www.cloudradial.com. It's our website. There you can book a demo, learn more about the product. We're active on LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can see us there. But the main thing is, start thinking. Again, all my advice, and again, it's where everything leads back to CloudRadial. That's why I'm confident we'll get every MSP at some point. But when you start thinking about it from the client perspective and working your way back to the MSP, as opposed to starting with your RMM report and working your way out, what you find is what your clients want is actually what you want to deliver. It's kind of probably why most MSPs got in the business, was to be transformative for their clients. But then they get bogged down with the minutia of security or reporting, and then just don't have time to create PowerPoints for all of their clients. So we're just saying, don't, right? Again, talk to the clients, but you don't necessarily need to prepare for it. You need to go listen. And that means those QBR meetings, those business review meetings, really aren't about an MSP review of their business. It's about a review of your client's business, right? And I think that somewhere along the way that got lost in the QBR process. But again, when you take this concept back, it changes the way you want to do your website. It's the way you attract new clients. And again, I think at the end of the day, thinking from client first perspective and having something like CloudRadial as your CSA is again, it's the way to transform yourself so that you can transform your clients.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, Jeff, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know you guys are moving fast and
We are.
doing some great things over there. So thanks for jumping on, and we'll make sure we have links to the group and the socials, and Ken, thank you very much for jumping on.
Hey, Kevin, thanks very much. I appreciate being here.
Sure.
Take care.